unfortunately, what happens over the years is there gets to be more rooting and more rooting and more rooting, and each person likes to plant their own little seed, their own little root, right? And before you know it, you got tradition. The traditions are often no longer actually these little doorways into the infinite. They're not just the rooting of the transcendent into the world of time and space, but they actually become behemoths in and of themselves. So all you end up with is roots and clutters of roots and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of roots. And it's very hard to work your way through all the roots. It's like a field of weeds. Not always, just 90% of the time. Of course, every once in a while someone comes along and pulls the weeds, right? Like a guy like Jesus comes along and he yanks out a bunch of weeds and redefines a whole tradition. Of course, some went with him, some didn't. That's fine. Both traditions are fine. But he was someone who came in and yanked out tons of form, tons of the old structure. And of course, it got him killed for doing it. But he did it anyway. Why did he do it? Because he had to do it. To breathe life back into something. What have we done with what someone like that has done? What have we done with what he did? Filled the whole damn thing full of weeds again. There's more weeds than there was when he started. Now he has become a weed, you know? Layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers. That's okay. You know? Something else will come along and pull the weeds out again and breathe new life, you know, into this structure, into this thing, whatever it is, whether it's the Christian thing or the Jewish thing or the Buddhist thing or the whatever thing. You see, only in retrospect did I realize that the very first day I was going up to find this obscure teacher's house, what I didn't know was that from the time I left home, I was being initiated into this timeless lineage of truth. The very obscurity of it was a teaching. The very point that you could almost not find the house, going down weird roads, not looking like what you think it's going to look like. The front door is not facing the driveway. It's facing to the side of the driveway. You can walk right past it and not even know it's there. There's so little of it that's rooted in time that you can miss it, and you miss it over and over and over and over and over and over. And so in a certain sense, I was being ushered into this totally different tradition. Not something that was really rooted in time. Time is rooted in it. It's not rooted in time. Therefore, when you come upon it, it doesn't have, as I said, there's no face to it. There's no historical figure in the past or the present. And so it's very easy. It's easy to miss because we keep looking for obvious things. We look for obvious things, like I was looking for robe-clad monks and big bells and temples and misty-covered mountains and all of that. And then I didn't find any of it. And when I did find it, and the door was open, wide open to me to walk right into it, to walk right into a tradition that was rooted in time, which is fine. It's not one's better than the other. They're just different. when the door was open, wide open for me, and I was given everything I thought I wanted, for some reason I couldn't understand, I couldn't make any sense of it, I just couldn't do it. Why couldn't I do it? Simply because there was another destiny. It just wasn't going to be the way it works out. It just wasn't going to be that way. There's no reason other than that. There's a fork in the road, and you go the only way you can go. You don't know that at the time. You may be confused why you go down one fork, why you don't go down another. But really, you go only the way you could go. You never really had a choice in it. You never had a decision point. You thought you did, but it was all inextricably laid out from the very beginning. Because remember, that kind of tradition is not rooted in time. There's no beginning, there's no past, there's no start, there's no finish. So the whole deal was sealed from the very outset. You see. And of course, it had a cumulative point when I actually woke up to what was actually happening, and realized this is bigger than Zen, which means this is bigger than any of the forms we put it into. I have no problem with the forms we put it into, whether we call it very traditional Zen or Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or Judaism or whatever the form is. The forms are fine, as long as the forms deliver you beyond them. You may still have a tendency to root what is beyond time back into time through a particular form. You may not. But when I realized this is bigger than Zen, that was the moment. That I didn't know it at the time, but that was the significant moment. That was the entering. Not I had entered, but that was being fully swallowed up by a lineage that does not have its roots in time. It's obscure. It's more obscure than when I was trying to get to that little Zen teacher's house in Los Gatos, and the front door wasn't facing front, and nothing was obvious, and very little was said. It seemed very obscure. A church is not obscure. It's there, it's not. You walk in, you feel the presence in the church, whatever it may be. It's all laid out there. What it's pointing to may be obscure, but the thing itself, not obscure. A Zen temple, there it is. It's not obscure. It's right there. What I'm speaking about, totally obscure. It's not there. There's no building that houses it. There's no theology that contains it. There's no teacher that is the sole embodiment of it. It's totally obscure, not rooted in the world of time. The paradox is what seems so obscure, what seems to be completely unrooted in the world of time, as ultimately truth always is, when you finally see it, when you finally become it, then what seems so obscure is the most obvious thing in the world. When you finally see it, then you realize it wasn't obscure. It was right out in front the whole time. Its form is not a particular form. Its form is every form. It's not a temple. It's not a Zen thing. It's not a Christian thing. It's not a Jewish thing. Whatever it is. It's every form. It's all of those and all the rest. And none of that. All at the same time. what you are takes all those forms, all of them, never stuck in any of them, never minding appearing as any of them, but at the same time, never being rooted in them. It's rooted in something beyond. What you are is rooted in something beyond all the forms, including the form of your particular body. It takes that form, but it's not rooted there. It's not stuck there. Nor is what I'm speaking about rooted in any ideology. It's not dualistic, it's not non-dualistic, it's not Advaitic or Buddhist or anything. It can display itself through all of that, easily, effortlessly. But it's not confined by it. It's not defined by any of that. That's its obscurity. Its mercurial nature, right? It's meaning you, what you are, what I am. It doesn't matter where you go. You can go into all sorts of different spiritual dimensions. This is just one among hundreds. You can go all over the place. But all of them are just temporary forms of the formless. So I told you this wouldn't be useful to you. It's not something you can utilize. It's not even a lineage distinct from other lineages. Remember, it's not rooted in time, so it holds them all. So it's not something you can join. Right? You can't wear it on your sleeve. You know what I mean? You can't put the appropriate jewelry on. Any jewelry will do. Do you know what I mean? You can wear long flowing gowns, or you can wear blue jeans overalls. It doesn't matter, you see. Because in that there's nothing to join. There's no form you're stuck to. There's nothing you're confined to. Neither are you then confined to the formless, though. Neither are you confined to have to be in the timeless. You're even free from that. You're free to wander the universe as you please, as the truth of you does all the time. Now, one of the difficulties of all this is a all or nothing proposal. Right? This is an all or nothing kind of thing. Truth is something you get or you don't get. You swing and you hit the ball over the fence, or you strike. Right? There's no consolation prize. There's no gray area. Right? Does that make sense? Maybe, maybe not. Some of you it makes sense. Right? It's like truth or no truth. Realization or asleep at the wheel. When something tries to root itself in time, which is perfectly okay, I'm all for that. I do things that are rooted in time, so that's fine. But things that try to root themselves in time, very quickly they start serving the purposes and the demands of time. So you root something in time, so there you go. The next thing you do, you've got a church, you've got your temple, you've got whatever. And the next thing that happens is people go to that wanting it to help them. Right? It's natural. I'm in time, I'm having trouble, I'm in chaos, I'm suffering, I'm confused, I'm whatever, and I want you to help me. So I'm going to go to this thing, and it's going to help me. And there's so much pressure, there's so much intense pressure that as the years go by, these forms, these traditions, these institutions start succumbing to the pressure, right, of managing the dream state. Which is fine. The dream state gosh, it's kind of a mess, so so it's okay that one manages the dream state, right? But so very easily the forms start managing the dream state more than they do delivering you. Words are difficult. Beyond the dream state, but that's not really true, because there is no beyond to something other than the dream state. So that's what you run up against when you come up against something that has no anchoring in the world of time. It's basically saying, you come to it on its terms and only its terms. And that's it. You come to it on its terms or you don't come at all. No consolation prizes. You don't end up being able to be a priest or a monk or join the group or be part of a crowd, or there's no consolation prize, right? There's no guru, there's no savior, nobody you can hold, you put your hat on, no one who's going to save you, there's nothing there because it's not rooted in time. Does that make sense? So it's a beckoning. You come to it, it doesn't come to you. And yet it's always present. And the place you make contact with it is the last place you expect. Because remember, it's obscure. It's out in the open, but it's so out in the open you never think to look there. Never think to look there. You never think to look in the most obvious place. In any good inner tradition, in any good one, you're going to have some means of trying to draw your attention to it. And usually it starts as something very simple. And it should stay that way forever, something extraordinarily simple. There's one thing about everybody in this room that most people, it's always happening, but you pay no attention to it at all. You pay no attention to it because it's always happening. You pay no attention to it because it is totally obvious, but its obviousness is what makes it obscure. So we pay no attention to it. Because we're only paying attention to things that we can touch, feel, mostly think, imagine, hope, dream, smell, taste. That's where all our attention goes. Does that make sense? And if we just put our attention in our senses, that would be good enough. That would be fine. But we don't do that. We don't put our attention in our senses. We put them in what we think about, what our senses pick up. So we're not even connected with our senses. Our senses are always working. You feel this, you feel that, you imagine this, you smell this, you smell that. But how many people are really aware of what they smell, or aware of what they see, or aware of actually anything that's going on? What they're really aware of is what they think about what they see, what they think about what they smell, what they think about what they're thinking about, what they're imagining about what they're imagining. So they're in an abstraction. That's why in so many spiritual teachings, one of the first things you are asked to do is to start paying attention to your senses. Right? Like, notice that you're breathing. What could be more basic? Oh, I never noticed that. I've lived for 50 years and I've never noticed that I was breathing. I mean, I knew I was breathing, but I never noticed it. I never felt it. I never paid any attention to it. It's one of those obvious things that's obscure because it's so obvious. Because it's so obvious, you may never pay attention to it. Or you're told to pay attention to something else. Pay attention to how something smells, how something tastes. Pay attention to how you move. In Zen, they have you meditate, and then in between periods of meditation, you walk around like zombies in slow motion. It's called walking meditation. Do you know? Why are you doing that? So you can actually feel what the floor feels like under your feet. That's why you're doing it. It's no esoteric reason. So you can feel the floor. You've never felt it before. You've walked on it your whole life, but it's been so damn obvious, you've never actually noticed it. Sadly, usually that's as far as it goes. That's it. You're just stuck with trying to pay attention to your senses. Right? But if it goes a little bit further into something even more obvious, and again, because it's even more obvious, it's more obscure. Right? Not because it's hidden, but because it's obvious. There's something more obvious than what you pick up in your senses, what you see, the world around you, what you hear, what you feel, what you think.